those. All right, so partnerships, let's kind of take this another step and get it into the classroom now. What types of classroom applications might be available out there? Let's say if you're just, it could be certainly that you're working with 2- or 3-dimensional mapping, but maybe just even simple reconnaissance and or surveillance kind of applications might be something enough that you could work with, and it wouldn't necessarily take a big mapping drone to do that. So I'd kind of like to go through a couple of examples again of what a couple of things we've done at St. Cloud State and what that might be all about. So okay. There we go. So again, we have used, of course, as Tom Owen mentioned, we also now do have a Matrice 200 series drone that we are using with some sophisticated Centera sensors. But we've also had the ability to, in some of our classes, simply use an Inspire 1 and an Inspire 2 that we have access to, and Maverick Pro 2 Pro Zoom that we are using. And I'm going to talk, well, we'll talk about both of those here very quickly in an application. One of them, I developed a collaborative project between St. Cloud State and Sartell Middle School, which is a town just north of St. Cloud here. And just to give you just a little bit of an overview of what's going on, because this kind of works a little bit to the point of the algae question that we just had. This is the Mississippi River, just north of St. Cloud. The red arrow indicates a dam that was built in, I think about 1907. And it was for a paper mill that used to be here, which is no longer, but the dam is still there. And when that dam was put in, it backed up the river a little bit. And there's this, if you take a look at where this gold arrow is located, this was sort of a lower line area, drainage way, older drainage way into the Mississippi. But of course, the water backed up, sort of flooded it, and sort of created this reservoir in here that became known as Little Rock Lake. Okay, all fine and good. I kind of got that out of whack, so I'll just go back here. I'll come back to that screen. Here you see, again, Google Earth, and here is Little Rock Lake. And there has been a lot of development, obviously, of homes around it, as we will see here. You can see the outlet comes down under Highway 10, and as then the outlet for the flow of water. Oh boy, this is going back and forth. Here into the Mississippi River. The problem that they have had, and if you note, and again, this sort of links into one of the things that I just talked about with the Rockville, Minnesota area and the wellhead protection. One of the problems, of course, is those very sandy, coarse soils that have maybe trouble holding because of the coarse nature. And the drainage through them of, again, pesticide residues, nitrates, from fertilizer and the like. And these soils as well, again, along this terraced and outwash area along the Mississippi River, present those same kind of structural problems and problems of groundwater contamination. And then add to that, of course, the development that you see around Little Rock Lake. And starting in the early 2000s, they begin to have some real problems with green algae bloom a little bit later in the summer and into fall. And that's Little Rock Lake. as it pretty much has looked like for the last 10 years. Again, we talk about TMDL, the maximum amount of pollutant that a body of water can receive without violating water quality standards. And again, an allocation of that amount. It's a process that identifies all sources of pollutants, determines how much of each source must reduce its contribution in order to meet that particular standard. So what you have here is, well, obviously, as you can see, it's a real problem. It's smelly, it's messy, it's slimy. I mean, it's like pea soup. And you can kind of see that here. So yes, Little Rock Lake has been designated as a lake in trouble. And there's several of them, as you might imagine, throughout the state. This red area that you see indicates the lake, and the fact that under the audit, it does need to do something to come up with some plan or some scheme to be able to reduce the amount of nitrates and so forth that are getting into the lake and the algae bloom that you see here. And it's almost sort of this permanent, especially as we get into the summer right now, problem that they've had. Well, they've been talking about this, like I said, for about 10 years. And of course, you've got two main interests here. You have the surrounding farmers, and you have, of course, the lake owners, you know, lakeshore homeowners. Each one blames the other. So, yes, if you look at it, you will see, and I just, not that this means anything to you, it does to me because it is a soil scientist, but the Hubbard, the Sartell, the Zimmerman, these are examples of very, very sandy soils, and they dominate many of these areas, and some of them, of course, because of their droughty nature, have center pivot or other kinds of irrigation. Homeowners are saying, well, it's that's leaching out again, nitrates from fertilizer, and that's what's getting into the lake and causing the problem. And there's no doubt that that is a problem. But on the other hand, the farmers will say, well, what about you homeowners in your septic fields? Doesn't that contribute? Well, homeowners aren't willing to admit that. The farmers aren't necessarily willing to admit that they're the sole problem in here. It's obviously probably a combination. So it was one of those what to do, and the wrangling back and forth got to the point in sort of the quality of the water that various agencies, obviously the DNR and others, Corps of Engineers, came up with an idea. What if we were to lower the level of the lake? In other words, open the dam that I showed you, lower the level of the lake, come in and take those exposed areas now that will be there and plant them with sedges and bulrushes and healthier vegetation that could combat and perhaps take in some of those nitrates. So that is what happened last year. I put this up here. I mean, this is part, again, you can see what's happening here, that it was covered with this slick green algae, makes it unappealing for boating or swimming, could certainly have detrimental effects to dogs and pets who might drink out of it. So they planted about 45, as it says, native plants, lake sedge, bulrushes, others on the exposed, and then the plants will absorb some of that lake's extra phosphorus, nitrates that cause it, and so forth, the algae to bloom. And the goal would be to return Little Rock Lake to the conditions that it was decades ago. It was rather an interesting problem, actually. This was obviously a big cause of controversy in the Sartell and the surrounding area, that before any of this drawdown took place, that a biology class in the Sartell High School took up this problem, developed a little curriculum component, and a lot of it dealt with how people were dealing with themselves and the environmental impacts and so forth. Prior then, and so the social studies, 8th grade social studies class decided they wanted to sort of build on what the biology class had done the year before and, you know, study this under a broader effect of the environment and the impact that it had on landowners, both farmers and lake owners and so forth. So I used my Mavic 2, and again, this is part of just a basic survey. This is a view that I took. Hey, there's my Mavic. I just got this. I was rather reticent about flying it over water. I had all sorts of visions of it plopping down someplace where it would, I couldn't get at it, but that proved to be unnecessary. So, all right. Here's the Sartell Dam, and this is when this is about the 3rd day that the gates had been left open, and well, I shouldn't say 3rd day. Actually, it took about a day and a half to lower the level of Little Rock Lake, maybe about 3 to 5 feet, and so forth. What it did, as you can see, was then to expose sort of this area that we see here. And again, these, as you can see, are the bulrushes, sedges. These are volunteers that are actually putting that in. So this is the effect. Now, understand, because the Sartell Dam is way down here, that also meant not only was the lake, but those portions of the Mississippi River between the dam and the lake would also be lowered. So I took the drone up, I flew some areas around the lake. Again, this wasn't part of any kind of mapping assignment. Actually, the Mavic 2, because it's of its camera, really cannot be used for the kind of PIX 4D kind of mapping that has to do with the camera. Don't get me started there, but you can see these levels. You can see the amount of land, the amount of the drawdown in here. Also note that in the river itself, sandbars and deposits that would usually be submerged were now being exposed at the surface. So it really did, I mean, it also exposed a lot of crud that people have been dumping into the river, you know, like refrigerators and car parts and that type of thing. So it was an opportunity for sort of a cleanup and so forth. But you can see these effects. And again, I was able to obtain oblique perspective imagery for that. And the nice thing about it, even some of the students in class got involved. They were taking pictures along the river. Here's Bingo, this little lab mix here, a retriever mix. Bingo likes to swim in the river. I mean, he likes to swim in a river. He'll jump in and stay in there an hour just paddling up and down. But you can see where the normal level of the water was. Here's Bingo. And they put him out and he walked out for the first time and really didn't think he would be able to jump in. Note the difference in height. So the fact was that you could also get students involved in this project as well. And this is actually, we were able to take off from this site and fly. One of the problems of flying along the river and even from the homeowners was finding a place that was level enough and that didn't have a lot of trees over it that you could get your drone up through the canopy. But again, note the level. And again, this is pre-flight or pre-drawdown. Hey, there goes the drone again. This is a little small county park that we were able to take off. This is the, hey, there goes the drone again. Okay, so you can see, and if you take a look at these little green splotches, that's after the plantings had been done. Again, this all took about a couple of weeks, and then they closed the dam up and then brought the water levels back up. Whoops, here we go. And you can see that. You can see where the plantings occurred. So again, the imagery allowed students to see exactly where along portions of the shoreline plantings had been done. And you can see the bulrushes here. You can also see this dock, sort of high and dry. So it really does give you some rather dramatic effects. And the report is, and this is something that came out late last fall and into the winter, work that has been done. You can see again some of these bulrushes and so forth. And now they're at a point, instead of green algae, they're beginning to see golden algae. I'm not a big algae fan, and I don't really know that much about it personally, other than it's green algae bad, gold algae good. And what it is showing is that some of this phosphorus and nitrate abatement perhaps is working, and that indeed it's not going to happen overnight, but some of this is possible in terms of what we're going to be able to do. And again, now we have this data, ground shots, we have drone reconnaissance shots and so forth. And so this material was used with other material that had been developed about the drawdown, studies by the DNR and so forth. And a small little project and a small little exercise was developed and put into the curriculum of the 8th grade social studies class that dealt with impacts of the drawdown sort of before and after. And again, asked Dr. Jargon, I'm not sure what that is. These are sites that talked about the drawdown, images and so forth. She actually had the students work with the pen tool to analyze the images in small groups using color coding of things that were new or anything that looked what people did after the drawdown to prepare for it. So they actually were able to do a little bit of mapping off of this imagery. I will also real quickly after this share what one of the lesson plans actually looked like. I got 11:11, okay. One of the other projects that we had hoped to work with and again, this is one of those collaborative partnership types of things with the Sartell Middle School, is something here we have in Minnesota. It's called the Department of Natural Resources Forest School Project. As it says, it's a program, it's a partnership between the Department of Natural Resources and Minnesota schools. And the program provides a variety of benefits to increase outdoor education activities. It's housed within the DNR's Division of Forestry, and it works closely with the stewardship, community and urban forestry, projects Learning Tree, Wild and Wet, and really many other programs that actually either have forest or woodlands that surround a school that can be developed and utilized for outdoor education, and putting that into the curriculum. This is just a simple Google Earth view of the Sartell Middle School, and you can see how it is surrounded here by a rather nice pond, some wetlands, forested areas that we see in here, of course. And this is, pretty much an area that the DNR said would meet their requirements, because, there's over 100 of these forest schools around the state. Sartell just got their final approval late last fall. And we said to ourselves at St. Cloud State, because we also know some of the instructors here, what if we were to fly this for you and actually develop some drone maps, 2D and 3-dimensional maps, surface heights for the forest. And again, the DNR, the middle school, the principals, and at least the vice principal and so forth, and some of the teachers sort of were working to develop a cooperative project where we here at St. Cloud State could develop and fly a UAS database that we could obviously keep up and maintain. And then COVID-19 hit, and a lot of those meetings that we try to have, and some of the flights, obviously school curriculum was out the window. I think it's still a great idea. It at least is a good showcase for what's possible, even though we weren't able to finish it as we might have liked to have done this spring. We did, however, Tom and I were able to do a couple of flights last summer in anticipation of this, and to develop some map products that we could show the DNR forest group and so forth, what we might be able to do, especially mapping some of the trails, mapping some of the health and vigor of the forest plots and the wetlands and so forth. I think they were very excited about that because that's something that usually isn't part of the forest project. These are just a couple of images that we took. One of the lake, or small pond, I should say, another one of the trails that goes through. They are using this for cross-country, for their alpine skiing, not alpine, cross-country skiing. But this is a orthomosaic that we flew and developed over part of that site. We also developed a digital surface model, as you can see here as well. Mainly, again, being able to measure crown height of the different components of the forest. I think was very interesting. Obviously, we can take both of those and overlay them on top of one another to bring out that kind of detail. One of the other things that we did was a separate flight using RGB, and these are two examples. We had an orthogonal view and a perspective view, both of which can be handled in Pix4D in terms of processing of the school itself, which has a rather interesting design, and trying to see if we could take a look at maybe developing a set of lesson plans for heat signatures, heat loss, heat mapping, certainly of the school. Here is an RGB image of it. Here is a thermal image of it. I'm not going to go into the interpretive components of both. Tom, I don't know, is there anything you want to add to those flights that we did of the school?
No, and I think Zach and Tom Biller had talked earlier about the fact that when we did a double grid pattern over the building,
yeah.
And then we flew at oblique. We flew at obliques too, you know. And Zach and I just wanted to mention, in a lot of that pre-workshop, I don't know if everyone has had a chance to log in. Zach and Tom Biller did a fantastic job doing the videos of the flight planning and talking about it. There is a lot of information in that, but it is fairly important as far as if you have some questions, because it covers a lot of the modeling. We flew this at 2 different altitudes. We had to land and do another flight plan around the building. But they can generate with the software that does this. It's not just for drones or for UAS or for geospatial. They can do modeling with this for a person or a statue. It's the software back, the engine that does this, does that surface, the reconstruction for that surface on those key points. So it's really more widely used than the geospatial side.
Yeah, I probably would agree with that. So thanks. So like I said, this was the first step or the first phase. Like, you know, we're all trying to figure out, no one knows what school is going to look like, especially the middle school project or classes and so forth next semester. I do, or I think we would like, especially with our newer system, maybe to fly the entire forest area again. And going into fall, maybe pick this conversation up again with the DNR. But even if it was sort of interrupted here, I think that maybe in some of the states where the participants live, that there may be similar types of projects, similar types of cooperative efforts, certainly between their own natural resources individuals, wetland specialists, foresters, and so forth, that for which imagery might be able to be developed and available. So yeah. Let me just show you one other thing real quick as it relates. I'm going to share, come over here, another screen. Actually, that's the problem with this. You got to get out of here, over here. Let me bring up a lesson plan already, and I guess I can only share one at a time. Okay, there we go. Whoopsie daisy. All right. Please stay with me. Of course, where else have you got to go, right? All right. I'm going to share this screen very quickly because it sort of segues into what we're going to be talking about on this afternoon in preparation for our maybe some lesson plan kinds of developments. So share this. Share. I'm going to assume you can see this. This is an example of the Global Studies 8th grade project. I'm just going to put this up and we can talk about it a little bit later. This is sort of a template that was developed for the Little Rock Lake area, and like I said, a lesson plan that was developed for them. I know that high schools and whatever you introduce obviously have to meet, you know, certain standards that are much more structured and maybe constrained and so forth that 8th grade or 10th grade class might have that you wouldn't necessarily have at the university level and so forth. There are state guidelines, obviously, skill sets and so forth that must be met as you put this in. But again, as small as this was, I'm just going to sort of, I'm assuming you can still see that. The general unit, the day, time, it showed you the number of minutes, the number of class periods. Here are your goals and objectives. And again, these are all the social studies state standards that were met by developing this particular curriculum or little study that was done. What the student outcomes would be, what they would be able to do in terms of using drone images for the drawdown, you know, before and after. The kinds of materials that were needed. The various kinds of sets of information, obviously, procedures, what was, you know, assessments, what you were getting out of it, and so forth. It is a certain set structure, and again, the question is, you know, are there templates that can be developed that sort of a generic kind of thing? And I think basically, and I'm sure for many of you, I don't have to tell you this, you've done enough of it, I'm sure you're probably yourselves. out there that, you know, you can all just Google lesson plan templates and probably come up with 100 in just a few moments. I think they all have certain things in common, certainly. And I'm going to get out of here. Okay. And this is sort of what, well, I'll tell you what. I'm not going to take any more time on this right now. I'll stop sharing. Yeah. We'll bring some of this up a little bit later because I know Steve Sorenson may have a couple of things that he wants to say as well. Like I said, this last hour and a half or so forth it was merely designed to show you what's possible. Certainly, perhaps what needs to be done as we look to incorporate this technology of UAS and not just for applications at the state level or county government or university researchers, but into again, the two-year schools, certainly high schools and middle schools, and to share this technology. And like I said, I really, really think that you have to look at this as a cooperative effort. You know, no one school is going to have the kinds of students, is going to have the kinds of equipment, the kinds of institutional government support to carry through projects like this. And again, that's why I keep coming back to the fact that I think that NCAT can play a very big role in this as a repository, as a place where we can share or serve as a conduit to share this kind of information that people can tap into, like yourselves, and with your own lesson plans and your own development. So hopefully we'll be able to take a look at that in a little bit more detail this afternoon as we break into sort of study rooms, study groups, and talk about this, develop our own lesson plans. Any questions with there, Zach? I know we're coming up on 11:30. We were supposed to do lunch. I didn't mean to suck all the oxygen out. Steve Sorenson?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have something that that you want to present? I didn't mean to take up the full time. I didn't think I would actually.
That's okay. I tend to talk fast and move through stuff. So
yeah, I think if we actually, excuse me, listen, somebody has something cooking on the stove right now, maybe take a few moments and have lunch, maybe a little bit later, take about 20 minutes or so or whatever. And then we'll break and come back and set the tone for what we want to do with our breakouts. All right?
sounds good to me.
Okay, I'm going to shut up.
Okay, I just had a couple things here in response to one of the inquiries yesterday. Let's see if I can figure this out here now. Okay. Here, let's start with this. I posted an announcement up on the homepage for the class. The link to the National Geospatial Technology Center of Excellence. So you can link to that, and we'll go to that site here in a minute. But also they have in there, they have a workshop here on story maps. So there's a link to that. There's also a copy of that in the content, and a link to their education page. So Geotech's website here. Suppose I should stop and ask, can everybody see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Good, thanks. So here's their website, and where's it going? The GeoEd here, if you go to their conference archives, they record and archive all of their GeoEd conferences. So the one I was looking at here, the building a functional story map. You see that's located there. You can click on that and it'll bring you to a Google Drive download. You can download that off their site. You can also go to their education page. They have concept modules, DACM results. If you don't know what a DACM is, it's developing a curriculum, and it basically lays out the tasks for certain occupations or fields. So this one right here, the chart for Geospatial Intelligence Specialist, we hosted that here at Northland. And it goes into the duties and then the skills for those duties. So as you're looking at, if you're prepping somebody for a job in this field, or you're looking at some sort of instruction, developing a curriculum regarding any one of the geospatial analysis skills, you can see where that fits into the job markets and what skills are needed or necessary for those tasks. They also have, let's go back to education. They also have a meta-DACM, which is all the individual DACMs they've done on analysis and GIS and remote sensing. They've compiled that into a meta-DACM. So all of those duties and skills are listed here. So you can pull those out, see what topics, skills you might want to include in your curriculum, in your lesson plans, and pull that information from there. This is also, these skills and everything are also bounced off the U.S. Department of Labor Geospatial Technology Competency Model. So it fits in with Department of Labor and industry standards and requirements. And that's all available to you for free. And what else did I have here? Okay. So in utilizing ARC online for these things, as Ben mentioned, they're partnered with their local soil and water conservation district, and we've done the same up here at Northland, and we've created a map for that. As like with these in the story maps, if you click on the item, it has information in there. You can create these drop downs for it. So this identifies our ditch and has locational information on it. But you can tailor those to whatever information you want. So if you're developing a curriculum and you want them to identify certain locations and collect certain information on those locations or provide certain information on it, you can include that information in those drop downs. So also they have an application in ARC. It's called Collector for ARC, and you can set up on their cell phones those little windows for collecting information, so they can go around and collect different information and put that into that Collector app, and then that app will feed it to a map in ARC Online. So you could have, say, 20, 30 students collecting data on storm sewers and fire hydrants in the town. And each one of those that they update, then when they update that collection of, oh, there's one here, you can give it a geographic location, and then that will update to your class map, which will show where all those things are. So another tool out there for you to use. And that's about it. All I have for that. The other stuff I have, we could probably go into in the curriculum development. I teach more of an experiential learning model, so I develop skills and then I have them work on a capstone project for the class. So each of the skills builds to the project, which builds to the final capstone at the end of the class. So that is all I have. Any questions?
I see no questions in the chat, sir.
Awesome. I have them riveted.